Well, hello, welcome to Last 10th. I'm Nick. Many people think if you lower the front of the car, there will be more weight on it and have more grip. Raising or lowering the ride height of an axle does not lower or increase the weight on that axle. Under no acceleration, you cannot shift weight front and back without physically moving objects around. You also cannot move the center of gravity around without physically moving parts of the car around. So here's a test if you have a sim. You can follow along and try this for yourself. Just pause it as we go. Go into your sim. It doesn't show this in all sims, but in this case, I'm using iRacing. It also works in Assetto Corsa if you have the car physics or telemetry module open, and it works on other sims too. But pick a car, any car, that has ride height adjustment. What you want to do then is to pick a flat and level track, such as a skid pad, then load any setup and take a look at the total weight on either axle. For example, note down what the total weight is for the front left and right corners. Now, increase the ride height of both front suspension. It doesn't matter by how much. Then take a look at the front axle weight again. Did the axle weight change meaningfully, or did it even change at all? Now, try lowering the ride height instead. Did that make a difference? Then what if you changed the rear suspension instead of the front? Did that make any difference? Now, reset the setup, then change the ride height of only one of the front suspension. Let's say front left. Did the weight of the front axle change meaningfully? Did it even change at all? Now that we know lowering one end of the car doesn't give you more weight, I know what you're thinking. But I swear I get more grip when I lower it. And that's because you do. So how does that all work? When you lower the ride height of one axle, say the front, what you're doing is lowering the front roll center. The roll center is a point where the body, or sprung mass, pivots around during roll from a kinematics point of view. Think of it as a hinge that the front body and suspension rolls around. A car rolls during cornering because lateral forces are pushing the body to one side. This force then travels through the suspension, wheels, and tires to the ground, causing load transfer. This force can travel through the suspension in two ways: through the spring and damper, and through the suspension linkages, such as control arms. And unlike springs and dampers, linkages don't really compress. They're like super stiff springs. So why does this matter? It matters because the height of the roll center determines how much force goes through the spring damper and how much force goes through the linkages. And if you've seen my workshop on how to set up a car for oversteer and understeer, you'll know that if you stiffen one axle, it will have less grip during cornering. If there's one thing you learned from this video, this is it. If you lower the front roll center, more lateral force will go through the front spring and damper and less through the front linkages. This effectively softens and reduces the front roll resistance, which will give you more front grip at the expense of rear grip. And yes, since it's now softer, the car could roll more than before. But what's more important is that the forces going through the suspension linkages happen very quickly. That means if you raise the roll center of an axle, the load will transfer faster. In other words, raising the ride height will cause that axle to react faster. Also, a lower roll center will reduce things like jacking forces, and this can cause the car to lower even more when it's cornering, but that's a topic for another day. So, is lowering the ride height of one axle to improve grip a good idea? Like with any setup decision, it depends on a lot of things. Generally, it will lower the center of gravity, which is typically a good thing. And in some cases, it will even widen that axle's track width, which can further reduce load transfer. So if you don't know why a lower center of gravity or a wider track is a good thing, check out my video on load transfer in the description below. However, an obvious consideration is whether there is enough ground clearance and whether you will have sufficient suspension travel after lowering it. Also, lowering one axle will induce more roll, which means your alignment may change more during cornering, and that may reduce grip. Lastly, any change to your ride height will also affect aero. As you can see, there are a lot of things to consider. Ultimately, you need to decide what you are willing to sacrifice to get more grip by lowering the ride height. For example, if aero doesn't matter and you have plenty of ground clearance, sure, lowering is something you can consider among many other options you may have to change the balance of the car. If you ever hear someone say, lower one end of the car so you have more weight on it, now you know better. If you like this kind of stuff and you want to learn more, don't hesitate to ask questions in the comments. I also have a lot of other videos like this, so make sure you check them out. I'm signing off, but in the meantime, keep sending it, and I'll see you next time.